The Ring City begins with you following in the footsteps of Gael. He guides you through them with these messages that are identical to the player-created ones that you've likely seen many of up until this point. This grounds Gael in the game's world and makes him feel closer to the player because he's using the exact same tools that you would use if you wanted to provide guidance to another player. We've seen FromSoft experiment with this idea before, with the messages in the Undead Asylum of Dark Souls likely being left by Oscar, but they haven't been this explicit about who left these messages until now. I always really loved this idea since Dark Souls is really all about grounding every mechanic in the game's universe so everything feels more real. In most other games, dying and returning to your previous checkpoint is a completely abstract experience. In other words, there's no logical explanation for it other than it's a video game, and that's just what video games do. But in Dark Souls, you do have a reason. You're an immortal undead linked to the bonfires, and they resurrect you when you fall in battle. These messages work the same way. They're not just a tutorial pop-up, they're a character in the game's story offering you guidance, which serves to pull you into the game's world just that little bit more. In the same vein as the messages from before, you also have these magic circles that were left behind by Gael too. An inferior game would have just arbitrarily turned off fall damage for these sections and had an abstract pop-up on the screen telling you what to do. But the way FromSoftware seamlessly wove their tutorial into the game's narrative and world is really admirable. And if you can just let me complain for a second, it's really a shame that they kind of forgot this and are now just doing normal tutorial pop-ups in the later games. I think that's kind of lame. But anyway, the messages in the circles not only help you, but they also provide an effective setup for what will eventually be the final boss later. This really works because the guidance he's giving you clues you into what his real plan is. In other words, if he didn't intend on being corrupted by the Abyss and killed by the player, then he wouldn't have guided you up till this point. This is a really incredible piece of subtle storytelling, using the game's mechanics as the mechanism for that, which I think is really, really cool. I really like these angel enemies. They encourage you to analyze your surroundings for safe spots before you charge in guns blazing, or swords flailing, I guess. They even shoot at other enemies too, which gives you an opportunity to take advantage of. They also encourage you to explore to find where their body is hiding, rather than just facing them head on like most of the other enemies in the game. Once you do kill them, then it makes backtracking to pick up items that you missed in the previous area a lot easier. And while you're doing that in the swamp area, you can pick up the Desert Sorceress set. For some reason, this armor set changes appearance depending on the gender of your character, which I don't really get, but I guess it does add some variety. I know this is subjective, but I prefer the look of the leg piece here, and I would really have liked if I could wear that on my male characters. But for what they are, I think both versions more or less accomplish what they set out to do, so I can't really complain too much. What I am going to complain about, though, are the differences between both versions of the Black Witch set. Look at the different leg pieces. I mean, that just reeks of cowardice. Alright, well, it's time for the part of the video that is undoubtedly going to make a lot of people really angry. You've definitely already heard enough about why the Demon Prince is a good boss, so for the sake of novelty, I am going to critique it instead. For one, the camera is really, really bad in this fight, and I don't really think this needs further explanation. You could just look at the footage. I mean, this just absolutely blows. When both are in their more aggressive melee mode, then really all you can do is just sort of backpedal and wait until one of them switches phases, and I think that that's not very engaging. If you try to attack them during this part of the fight, then you're pretty much just gonna get put in a blender and shredded immediately. I think that they should have either switched phases more quickly, or maybe both of them do it at the same time in order to cut back on this downtime. I don't really see what this adds to the fight. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't really understand why people seem to praise this boss as the pinnacle of gank fights in the series when Sister Frieda Phase 2 is in the same game. A lot of the things that people praised this fight for were either done first or done better with Sister Frieda Phase 2, like these off-screen telegraphs and just having one enemy that's aggressive and one that is less aggressive to complement each other. With Sister Frieda Phase 2 as well, you have to still pay close attention to Frieda herself, because sometimes she can run away and heal Ariandel, which I think adds a layer of strategy to the fight that the Demon Prince doesn't really have. I guess the Demon Prince provides a more memorable spectacle, but I think that Sister Frida is a lot more polished and just, in my opinion, more memorable overall, especially with that amazing bait and switch at the end of it. And lastly, my biggest gripe with this boss is the fact that it just has no reason to be here. In the previous area that you just came from, which is from Dark Souls 2, you encounter enemies that were relevant to that game. So why is it that when you arrive at the ruins of Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1, you don't find anything relevant to that game's setting? The reason why it feels out of place is really obvious to anyone who knows anything about Dark Souls 3's development. Because the Demon Prince was originally going to be in Smoldering Lake of the base game, which would have been a lot more appropriate of a place to find it in. I appreciate that they were able to get good mileage out of cut content like this, but on the other hand, I would have preferred if they designed a boss from the ground up with Dark Souls 1's setting in mind, instead of using a boss that was made for a completely different part of a completely different game. Hey, so I'm recording this while editing, and I actually just remembered that I think that the Demon Prince is loosely based off of the Batwing demons from Dark Souls 1, so this seems a bit silly in hindsight. I think with how significant Firelink Shrine was in Dark Souls 1, though, that they probably should have made something that was more relevant considering how rare those Batwing demons were, but I think that this is probably grounds for adding +1 to the nitpick counter. But I don't think this is a bad boss or anything, and I do like that the second phase is dynamic depending on which one you kill first. Never mind the fact that Ornstein and Smoke did that first and did it better, but it's fine. Anyway, go ahead and, get goods or your skill issues out of your system in the comments. Go ahead. I know you want to. By the way, just as a spoiler, I don't really have a lot of bad things to say about the other bosses in this DLC, so don't expect the tone of the rest of the video to be as critical as this part was. Alright, well, I guess I'll just do a short section on the enemy design because I have a couple things to say about it. The Turtle Cleric enemies are really cool because they encourage you to use the kick, even though they don't have a shield, which I think there's only one other enemy in the game that does that. It's those little lizard things from Archdragon Peak. The Ring Knights are pretty scary, but I like that you can pretty easily knock them down and stagger them, which encourages aggressive play. But I think the most interesting enemy by far are the Herald Knights. They're really one of the only enemies in the game that encourage you to take advantage of the environment rather than just fighting them head on like you do with 99% of the other enemies. But I think that they really go overboard with them here on this staircase because Shira is right within range of them. If you aren't paying close attention and your first instinct is to run up the stairs and not down, then you're gonna get cornered and then promptly comboed into oblivion. And if you notice them coming before that happens, it's really awkward to break away from Shira's dialogue to deal with the looming threat. You can say that this is my fault for not looking both ways before I cross the staircase, and you would definitely be correct, but in my opinion, going through the motions of doing the plunging attacks over and over again every time you want to talk to her does get a little tedious. Anyway, I think that they probably should have put her somewhere else instead. Oh, this is a hell of a nitpick, isn't it? Speaking of nitpicks, one thing I'm not crazy about is how Alva here can invade you despite you not being embered. I think I know why they did this, so they can keep the piece of environmental storytelling with him protecting the Black Witch set, but it does sort of break the rules that the game established previously, which is a bit harmful to immersion. This could have been solved if they just had him be a normal NPC instead of a phantom. I know that you can find his corpse in the base game, but you can kill Patches in the base game and still have him appear in the DLC, so I don't see why that should have stopped them. Oh, spoiler alert, I guess. Anyway, I still have a few more nitpicks left before I get to the interesting part of the video, so just hold on a little longer. When you reach the swamp below that staircase, you'll be face to face with this giant here who is complete and utter bullshit. A pretty interesting enemy since he doesn't really fight you directly. This is just my preference, but I kind of wish that they gave him more health and made him a non-respawnable enemy. That way you'd have more incentive to fight him since killing him once would permanently make the swamp safer to explore. But as it stands, there isn't really any reason to kill him every time you come through considering how challenging he is, so it really is just easier to run past him. Unless you're doing the show your humanity puzzle because you're pretty slow and defenseless in that form, so you really don't have a choice. Speaking of which, I think the show your humanity puzzle probably could have been telegraphed a lot better. It's really easy to miss, and if you miss it on your first time through this area, then you're probably not going to be able to do Lap's quest without backtracking or looking up a guide. The place where his quest concludes is pretty much right after this area, and you'd have no reason to go back there on your own after you've already been through it once. So if you end up backtracking for Lap's quest, then it ends up being kind of hard to figure out where to find him, since normally you find him along the main path as you complete it, and nothing really clues you into the fact that you need to go back to this specific spot here. If you solve the humanity puzzle when you first find it, then you would naturally run into Lap in the next area because the main story path takes you there regardless. And I think that this is a real shame because Lap's quest, in my opinion, is by far the best and most compelling part of the Ring City, and I actually think it might be my favorite NPC quest in the entire franchise. It's a perfect microcosm of the game's themes, as well as just being really morbidly funny. Despite all the time that's passed and all of the kingdoms and ages that have come and gone, here he is doing the exact same thing he's always done, and here you are falling for it, in an endless, perfunctory cycle with no meaning.
Every age, it seems, is tainted by the greed of men. Rubbish to one such as I, devoid of all worldly wants.
Anyway, on to Calamite. He breathes fire on a bridge like every other dragon that's ever existed. But the run-up on this bridge is actually quite a bit more interesting than the other ones. For one, they put some items down here to bait you into stopping for them, which will no doubt get you incinerated. One of them is even literally rubbish. I am not joking. This corpse here is reaching out towards the safe area, which I think is really ironic, since picking up that item can easily get you killed in the exact same way I assume this character was. Also, you have this asshole who tries to push you out of it once you get to it. Overall, I just like how they designed the traps for this bridge. So yeah, super scary dragon that needs to be weakened before you can fight him. You know the drill. Yep. Before I fight him though, I always make a point to grab the +3 version of the Chloranthy ring. On a side note, the +3 rings in the DLC really go to show how much of an afterthought New Game Plus is in this game. There's really no reason to do it anymore whatsoever. Alright, well anyway, Midir is pretty cool. He's probably the best dragon boss in the entire series, followed closely by Calamite. Though, despite what FromSoft has said in the past, he's hardly the most challenging boss in the game. In fact, if we don't include Half-Life, he's at... Half-Life? Really? If we don't include Half-Light, then he's actually the easiest boss in the DLC. Maybe it's because of how polished he is, or maybe he just doesn't do enough damage, but either way, there isn't really any bullshit in this fight like there is with the Demon Prince. His attacks are really fair and intuitive, especially this breath attack here, which just feels absolutely awesome to dodge, and for being a huge boss, I didn't really have any camera issues either somehow. There's not really anything to critique about him, but I do have a couple ideas as to how maybe he could have been made more interesting. Alright, get your tomatoes ready, because here comes the hot take. Midir really could have had a tail cut mechanic. Now, just to be clear, I don't think a tail weapon should have replaced his boss soul, but it very easily could have been an extra reward alongside it. Hear me out. Midir has a huge health pool, and it actually isn't hard at all to reach his tail during certain attacks, especially compared to Seath and Calamite, who were pretty much always facing the player directly, making it really hard to get behind them. And even better if he had a couple more tail attacks that you could shut down and deprive him of when you cut it off. I'm not saying he needed it to be good, but I think it could have added an extra layer of tactics other than just basically staying in front of him and whacking his head over and over and over again. Which by the end of the fight, because of how much health he has, does get a little bit repetitive. And to those of you who think it would encourage you to be cowardly and avoid facing him head on, ask yourself this. What is the player going to do after they cut the tail off? That's right, fight him normally. Oh wait, I actually have one nitpick. This combo attack he does here is a little bit silly because it always carries him past you after the first couple attacks, so he ends up just kind of attacking the air in front of him. I don't know if in the lore if it's because he has trouble seeing like Seath does, but the rest of his moves don't really take that into account, so it does seem a little bit out of place. Yeah, okay, we're getting really deep into nitpick territory, let's move on. So back on the main path, it's time for the next story boss, the Spear of the Church fight. It's like the one boss from Demon Souls. Actually, it's a carbon copy of it. Huh, but you already knew that, didn't you? Okay, I'm kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for critiques now. I honestly don't have many bad things to say, nor do I have many original thoughts either to add to this mostly redundant and perfunctory video. But I will say that I had a lot of fun invading as this boss in Dark Souls 3's heyday. Speaking of original thoughts, I'm about to hit you with the hottest of hot takes. Are you ready? I bet you aren't. Hold on to your seat. Gael is a good boss. A really good boss, actually. In fact, I don't really think there's much wrong with him, if anything at all. I mean, this teleport was kind of bullshit, but aside from that, I don't really have anything to critique about him at all. As far as, like, basic combat encounter bosses go, he's one of the best, if not the best, in the entire series. So here's just a random couple thoughts on him. I really love the lightning in his final phase and how it forces you to pay attention to the arena and your positioning and how well telegraphed it is on the ground before it strikes. Despite how much there is going on in this last phase, it never really feels unfair. I really love this crossbow move and how you can avoid it by running instead of rolling. It just looks really cool too. I also really love that he staggers somewhat frequently. Knowing that he does this somewhat often, I feel encouraged to play more aggressively than I normally do, which makes the encounter have a much faster pace. Do I really need to continue? I mean, you already know he's good, and you've also probably listened to countless other people explain why he's good. Anything else I can possibly say is going to be completely and utterly redundant, just like this entire video. Wow, I'm really out of ideas, aren't I? It's like I'm unknowingly partaking in an endless cycle, one that has played out many times before me, and my actions here serve no greater purpose other than perpetuating it. You know, I've been struggling to say novel things about this DLC because it's already been discussed to death, so what better way to do that than to tell you about a very specific anecdote I have involving the Ring City. Maybe then I can finally break this grueling cycle, so get comfortable because it's story time. So, there I was, about 3 years ago, sitting in my room all alone, scrolling a little internet forum I found. To get to the point, this forum wasn't about Dark Souls specifically, but it did pertain to video games. One day I saw someone there strike up a conversation about, you guessed it, Dark Souls 3. Being the lurker that I primarily was, I scrolled through the conversation and learned that somebody on this forum that I frequented was spending time invading in the Ring City. He shared the name of his character and described his build as he discussed it. To my surprise, another forum goer chimed in and said something like, oh hey, we ran into each other the other day in the Ring City. And then they talked about their experience meeting each other. So picture me, a very lonely deer with really nobody to talk to at the time, who was too much of an asocial asshole to just make a post directly engaging with this person. I really wanted to make a friend, I guess, and so I set out to do it in the most ineffectual and convoluted way possible. So I sat embered near the inner wall bonfire and waited for him to invade me, completely oblivious to the RCE exploit that was currently ongoing, mind you. My plan was to wait for him to invade me, and when he found me, drop a bunch of really good items for him, like Sieg Brews and Divine Blessings and whatever other tasty snacks I had on me at the time. Then, as he went to pick them up, I would do the Dark Moon loyalty gesture. My hope was that he would recognize me as a member of that forum who had read his post before. Once he invaded and accepted my gifts, I'd return to the forum and wait for him to make a post asking who the noble knight bearing gifts was. From there, I could come in and take the credit, and then maybe we could get to know each other better and become friends from there. A foolproof plan. Bound to work. No, it obviously didn't work. I waited and fought off invader after invader, but he never came. I tried this several days in a row at different intervals, and it never worked. Defeated and resigned to my solitude, I gave up and beat the area boss, locking off my chance to meet this person forever, because it was really the only way I could ever have met this person, or anyone for that matter. Anyway, to get to the point of all of this, when I was sitting here recording footage recreating all of this, I got this feeling of deja vu. Here I was, doing the exact same thing I was doing 3 years ago, sitting in the same spot, playing the same game, thinking about the same thing, defeating the same bosses, exploring the same levels, talking to the same characters. Around that time, I was playing through the whole trilogy again to prepare for the release of Elden Ring. When I finished up my playthrough of Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring was only a week or so away, I told myself this: well, that's pretty much it. I've done everything there is to do in these games. I've beaten all the bosses, explored every path, talked to every character, picked up every item. I'm fulfilled of these games. I'm done, and it's time to move on. Yeah, in hindsight, that was pretty stupid. Why am I still playing this game? I mean, I guess right now it's to make a pretentious video essay about it, but I found myself really enjoying this most recent playthrough. I was having fun. Having fun doing the exact same things I've done over and over and over again, and I highly doubt this is going to be the last time either, video or no video.
I don't know. Maybe it's just the way we are. I'll stick you in my prayers. A fine dark soul to you.
Believe me when I say that, I'm one of the first people to tell you that blind adherence to a status quo at the expense of others or yourself isn't healthy, and I think this is kind of what Dark Souls 3 is trying to say with its story, or at least one potential interpretation of it. Obviously, there's nothing bad or evil about simply playing a video game, but the game seems to be practically screaming this message at you, that it's time to move on. There's nothing left here but ashes. It's time to embrace a change. A fire can only stay lit for so long. The end is here, and all you can do is accept it. But I can't ever see myself moving on from these games. Ever since I played Dark Souls for the first time in 2013, they've been on my mind almost every single day for at least a few moments each one. I didn't even really like Elden Ring as much as a lot of other people did, but I was still obsessed with it for months on end. This entire time, I've been trying to write down ideas for this video that I think are novel, so that I can add something new to the conversation, but I'm not nearly conceited enough to think that I've succeeded in that. I have to confront the idea that I'm making a video about a DLC for a game that has been discussed to absolute death with no stone left unturned. No mystery unsolved. As I write this, I'm wondering who could possibly want to watch this utterly redundant video that's already been played out a million times before I showed up on the scene, and will no doubt play out many, many more times in an infinitely recursive cycle. Who's to say when it'll end? Who's to say if it'll end? Maybe I'm just making this video for myself because I love these games too much to let go of them. And maybe you're watching it because, despite me not telling you anything you don't already know, you just like listening to people talk about the games you love. And I think that's okay. The final boss arena of the Ring City feels like an epilogue of an epilogue. The world is over. Everyone and everything is reduced to ash, and nothing is left except a massive, barren wasteland of nothing. Everything has run its course, and it's time to let go. If there's even anything to hold on to anymore anyway. Everything that could be gained has been gained. Nothing is left to save or protect. The only thing left for you to do is accept the arrival of the inevitable end. Or don't. It'll happen regardless. The end of your playthrough, the end of the game, the end of the trilogy, the end of this cycle, and if you want to get more abstract, the end of you someday. Someday, your fire will fade too, and the ashes that you leave behind will diffuse over top of the mountains of those who came before you. Sooner or later, you'll be totally buried in them. Why am I doing this? Why am I making this video? Why am I getting up in the morning? Why do I do anything? I don't know. I just do. I don't really have a reason. But does what happen after we die even matter? Is the inherent transience of our own existence a good reason to not do anything? But then what is a good reason to do something at all? All I really have are my own whims. My whims to do things that make me happy and share those things with like-minded people. And so, despite the fact that I've explored every corner of these games many times over, I still choose to replay them. Over and over again. Replaying old, familiar games is comforting. No matter how much your life changes, you can still boot up one of these games and lose yourself in them like it was the day you first played it. Maybe you were healthier back then, or maybe you had less to worry about. Even if the current version of myself knows that there's absolutely nothing new for me to gain, no new knowledge, no new experiences, no new lessons, I still return to them anyway. Maybe it just makes it easier to reminisce. Maybe you feel the same way, or maybe you don't, and you have a totally different reason for returning to these games. But I don't really think the reason matters all that much. What matters is that you feel something while playing it. If you didn't, only then does it become meaningless. Maybe your reason is that you feel satisfaction of overcoming great odds, or maybe you actually did find a new idea to ponder, or maybe you learned something about perseverance by doing a soul level 1 run or a challenge run. If you enjoyed your time along the way, regardless of the reason, then there's no omnipresent force telling you you aren't allowed to be content. Contentedness is just a feeling, and nobody can take it from you or tell you when you aren't or are allowed to feel it. Or, maybe this is just an elaborate cope to justify why I've played through this game 10 million times, instead of doing, literally anything else. I've been trying to spin the themes of this game into some kind of applicable message, but I don't think I'm nearly smart enough to do that well, so all I can really offer are these little reflections. Anyway, I hope they at least provided an entertaining distraction for you. You know what? How do you interpret the themes of the Dark Souls games? I'd like to hear what other people think. What do these games mean to you? Let me know in the comments. Okay, that's enough rambling for a bit. I think I need a break from Souls games. They make me babble incoherently like this. Or maybe I'll just keep playing through them like I always have. I don't know, maybe it's just the way I am. Oh, and before you go, a fine dark soul to you! Okay, thank you for watching, and I hope you at least got something out of this mess of a video, something to think about or ponder or agree with or disagree with, whatever. Anyway, thanks, and see you around. Oh yeah, and while I was actually editing this video, I managed to hit 500 subscribers, which is really, really awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'm gonna keep making videos, so look forward to those. Thank you.